I mean, we could have a whole riff on Never Stop Exploring, because I do honestly joke about Never Stop Exploring all the time. And like with J-Star the other day at the Crag, I was like joking about Never Stop Exploring.
What do you mean?
Well, I just joke that if I ever stop exploring, I'll get fired. Like I love going to new places, doing new things, trying new ways, like, you know, even like small scale exploration within your backyard, you know, even like trying a new trail to the Crag, things like that. Just like I see that all as exploration. And I do think that after 20 years of consistently joking about how I should always be exploring, I think it has made me more of an explorer. You know, it's like you fake it till you make it. It's like I just keep saying, don't stop exploring. And then eventually you're like, you know what? I think I am kind of an explorer.
Yeah. I mean, I know what I love about like that sort of like curiosity, but like what works for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think curiosity is exactly the word. I mean, I think that the idea never stop exploring gives you permission to ask questions about the world, to try new things nonstop, to like always be pushing in interesting ways. I just think that that's the best way to interact with the world. If you want to start your exploration, go to thenorthface.com.
That would be so funny if you like send in your resignation. I'm done exploring. Like,
well, dude, eventually I'll get too tired. I'm gonna post something on social, be like, after 25 good years, I'm tired of exploring. Now I'm just gonna sit on my sofa and watch Netflix.
Somehow I don't see that happening.
Competition can bring out the best or it can bring out the worst in people, right? And I think for me, being in that situation, it always put me on my game in a way that like I was able to perform better under that pressure or, you know, being a little bit nervous. And so it was really cool to like be back in that like element and in a way like not really have too much expectation around it, but to be on that space where you have to perform, like when you go up and you have like one shot and to make it count, it's very exhilarating.
Alex, do you ever have like recurring stress dreams ever? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like where it's like you wake up and you haven't done something, or I don't know, like something along the lines of that.
I know what you're talking about, but I basically never remember dreams, and I never have nightmares, and I don't stress at night or during the day.
Of course. So you are aware that these kind of dreams haunt certain people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I was like thinking about today's episode and basically the premise for it. I felt like, what would like an aging professional climber's recurring dream be? I think it would be something like you find out that you have to go to a comp the next day that you weren't planning for, that you hadn't trained for. You didn't really like know anyone who would be there, and everyone there was a lot younger and a lot
better,
more. Well, yeah, like all of it, right? Yeah. Like you'd be like, oh crap. And I don't know, thinking about today's story, I was like, holy cow, this is actually, someone actually chose this stress dream. Like where they like did it. Tell us about it.
Yeah, Chris Sharma, what a dude. No, I mean, basically he gets overpsyched to get back into competition climbing and can't decide, doesn't know how, like, I don't know. I mean, it's so crazy, but it's such classic. It's like quintessential Chris Sharma that he's like, I don't know, should I go? Should I not go? And then he has a good gym session at his home gym and is like, screw it, I'll go. Buys a ticket, flies to New Jersey, drinks way too much caffeine, gets all jittery, and then, you know, does fine. I mean, I guess he gets second, but he like, I don't know, it's just so... God, what a journey.
Seriously. So today we sit down with Chris Sharma to talk about his unexpected return to competition climbing. What would possess a legend in his 40s to return to a competition circuit dominated by climbers in their early 20s?
Or late teens.
Or late teens. Yeah, I have no idea.
Or early teens. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we're going to find out.
I'm Alex Honnold.
I'm Fitzko Hall.
This is Climbing Gold.
I'm like, welcome back to the show, Chris. You know, you're one of our few repeat guests now.
Nice, man. I made it. Dude, you know, it's so funny. I got this, I don't know, I think it was like a message on Instagram. I don't even know what like media source it was, but they were like, congratulations, you've been selected to be like as one of the top 80 climbing influencers. It's like, I made it.
Top 80. You know, you gotta do what you can, man.
It is what it is, man.
But can you tell us when did you start rock climbing and when did you do your first competition?
So I started climbing in 1993, and I guess I did my first competition in 1994, like the local gym competition. It was called the Crank d'Amour. It was in February 94, I guess. So it was like the Valentine's Day comp that they had at the climbing gym in Santa Cruz.
And so you would have been a 13-year-old or something, or?
I think I was 12. Yeah. So if I was, I mean, I guess especially if you start climbing in the climbing gym, right? That's kind of like the first step of as far as like developing yourself as a climber, right? It's like the first next step as like, you know, getting deeper into it would be to like do a comp, right?
Do you remember how you did in that comp?
I guess it was probably like an age category thing. So, and I think I may have won it. I don't remember.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't, but because so how soon after that did you make the jump into adult comps? And because you went to nationals or something like soon after that, right?
That was February 94. And I remember being 13, I competed at the City Rock Nationals. And it must have been like, I don't know, in June or something like that same year.
How'd you do with that?
I didn't do great, but it was like my first taste of like the real deal competition, which was pretty rad to be there. You know, looking back on it, especially, you know, like thinking about all the amazing characters there.
And so you're talking about like open adult level nationals, not youth competitions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a 13-year-old, you were competing against adults who were like on climbing magazines and things like that.
There still weren't youth competitions back then. I went to the first youth nationals. There was the first youth national championships. I think it may have been later on in that same year or the next year. And I remember it was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was underneath the bleachers of this high school football stadium. It's kind of classic little anecdote for sure.
It's funny because I started climbing in Northern California, same as you, only a couple years later. But when I'd started, there was the Youth Climbing League and there were a couple other sort of youth competition circuits. And so, you know, even though I was only a few years after you, it's interesting that I kind of got the benefit of like a whole youth development league. You know, it's like where I did a bunch of comps as a kid.
It's crazy when you think about how fast some of that stuff progressed and like what a transition period that was, I think, early 90s, right? Where it was like, I mean, some of those gyms were like I think City Rock, and then, I mean, even Pacific Edge were like some of the first gyms in the States, right? So
what are your overall impressions from those early competitions? Like, what do you remember from the early comps that you did?
I mean, those are two very different examples. So like that nationals, you know, it was like open nationals. I'm this little kid that just started climbing less than a year before. And there was like Scott Franklin and Jim Carr and Steve Schneider and Hans Florian and Mike Pond, Steve Hong, like all the, you know, like the original, like badass climbers from the US, right? Especially in the comp world. Go into junior nationals. I remember I met Obi at the junior nationals. So I met him and I think I got second to Dave Hume. Maybe I got second or maybe I got first, but taking that whole era and like thinking about like one specific point, like when it was the national championships in 1995 in Mission Cliffs, which was like the big paradigm shift when like I was 14, I won, Dave Hume got second.
Yeah.
I don't know who got third. Oh, I think Tom got third. And like Katie Brown. Yeah, that was like a big paradigm shift for sure. And in climbing, like that kind of like threw everybody off quite a bit.
Like a changing of the guard. Like all of a sudden, all the best climbers are under 15.
Yeah, it was a big deal for sure. But I think like that, what happened in 1995 when we kind of like swept the field at the national championships was like pretty kind of groundbreaking and kind of just like, it was a big paradigm shift. It was a very disrupting moment in climbing because like we were 14 years old. Like it was, it was like, I mean, there's a big difference between 14 and 20, you know? And and we were like little kids. And so,
yeah, how do you think that felt for people who'd been devoting their whole life to performing? Somebody like Steve Schneider and like Jim Carn and all these guys who had like made it their life to be good rock climbers, and all of a sudden a bunch of kids show up and just destroy them.
I'm sure it was like a challenging moment. You're like kind of like really have to like assess what you're doing, and especially there was no other like reference at that time. Like now we kind of like know like that's a part of climbing, and you're like, even if a 14-year-old kid like burns you off on your project, you're like, whatever, that happens and it's not a big deal. But
yeah, totally.
But when that happened for the first time, everyone was just like, whoa, like what is this?
Were the adults gracious about it?
In general, like it was pretty well received. Like I think it was like it injected a lot of excitement and like youth literally into the whole thing.
So you didn't get yelled at by any of the adults?
I think it did shake things up quite a bit. And I'm sure like not all of that was like received positively for everybody, because you can just imagine like if you dedicate yourself to this and then suddenly you're like, what am I doing? Right. And it's like, what does this all mean? I'm sure that like,
well, we both experience that all the time when you're like, oh, I've devoted my whole life to rock climbing. Then some 13-year-old on the board is just doing crazy things that you don't even understand. And you're like, huh, like, that's so crazy. You're like, how can I be so relatively bad at this thing that I've devoted my entire life to?
I mean, yeah, ultimately, I guess that's like, it's usually pretty healthy, right? Like to be humbled like that, it puts things in perspective, I guess.
So how far did you take competition climbing when you were young? Like what were the biggest comps that you did?
I'm trying to think about like, yeah, timing wise, but like 1997, I think was like a big year for me as far as like international competitions. I also red pointed Necessary Evil and Just Do It. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to Europe with Tommy and I climbed, like I started working on Biography and I almost sent that. And then we went and toured and did like a bunch of World Cups and I won one of them. That was kind of like my main dose of competition climbing. I feel like after that I did some, but after that I kind of like tapered out.
Was it intimidating to be a young teenager competing on the global stage, to be like a 15-year-old in Europe competing against the sport's biggest stars, people whose routes that you're trying to climb and things like that?
I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing to be able to compete. Like if I look back, that group of people that were competing back then. So yeah, like Francois Legrand, Yuji Hirayama, Elie Chauveau, Francois Lombard, Christian Brenna. They were such amazing climbers. It was amazing watching Francois Legrand compete, like such a master at what he did. And yeah, to be able to compete alongside those guys was like, I mean, it's like a huge honor for me, I think, looking back on it, because I was definitely like not of their generation. I was way younger than them. So it's really cool that I got a taste of that original kind of comp generation.
But so what drove you away from competition? Like, why did you stop doing competitions? Like, why didn't you just keep trying to dominate the World Cup series or whatever else?
There's a couple of things. Like one, I got injured in 1998, and that definitely like set me on a different path. I like had a knee injury, so like a year later. And also, I feel like maybe it's going to sound weird, or come across the wrong way, but it came really easily to me. Like I literally like 2 years into my climbing career, like I won the national championships and I got second in the world championships, And so like, I felt like I experienced what winning was like, and it felt like I did that and I got a taste of that. And honestly, I was more inspired by rock climbing, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Like I had that experience and I was kind of like psyched to move on from that and experience other things. I think it's different now with the Olympics. The Olympics is like a different level of kind of prestigiousness and everything. But I think our sport is still more defined by those like groundbreaking achievements on the rock. If you think about who did the first ascent of Action Direct or who free climbed the nose or stuff like that. If you think about trying to remember who won the world championships in 1996, I think basically everyone's going to be hard pressed to remember that. Right. And so I think especially looking back on the people that inspired me back in the day and see what they were doing on rocks, that seemed more important than competitions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, with modern competition, it feels like the only real way to make a mark is sustained dominance, like Yanya, where it's like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to say what exactly she's won, but she's just won everything. And so you're sort of like, oh yeah, no, she's the best.
Yeah.
But you're right that with a lot of other competitors, like you kind of only remember if they've won a lot of things, because it's hard to differentiate between world championships and the World Cup series and the overall title and the series and like all the different stuff that people can win.
At the end of the day, like everyone's got to decide what's best for them and what, inspires them and how they want to spend their time. But I feel like I was inspired by, people like Jerry Moffitt. I remember getting to hang out with him on that very first trip to Europe when I was there with Tommy, and just him saying like, yeah, like doing that first ascent was always like way more meaningful than winning a competition. Right. And yeah, I think those achievements do stand the test of time more than competition wins. I've seen kind of like that pattern amongst comp climbers where it's like this intense period of training, super intense to like be in that whole World Cup circuit. I mean, they're at this very, very high level, but they don't really have like the freedom to utilize that fitness on the rock ever. And then once the competition season's over, usually it's like at the end of the year or something like that. Usually traditionally in the World Cups, like the last World Cup was in Slovenia. And then the comp people will like come out and they'll have like a month to go rock climbing.
Yeah, where they just climb all the hardest routes in the world. They're like, I'm free.
Well, it's interesting. So like they'll have like a month off to go rock climbing before they have to take their mandatory month break before their training cycle starts again, right? And like what I always saw oftentimes amongst those people were that they had that month where they could just go play, but they were also like so shot emotionally drained and everything, that even though they might have had this, insane level of fitness and strength and whatever, they were not always able to like channel that,
try their hardest
to like really like have amazing results on the rock. And so you have these amazing athletes that should be able to do like these amazing achievements. A lot of these people were never really able to translate that into like rock climbing ascents. And so, and then, basically just get sucked into this wheel of competition cycles over and over again. And then, I don't know, everyone has a different trajectory and story, but it seems like in general, the common theme is like at some point kind of get burnt out and then be like, okay, I'm going to go rock climbing down.
We'll be back with more after the break.
All right, Alex, when you were like the most sort of broke dirtbag, like what did you eat?
For me, the scrappiest nutrition was basically Walmart pasta and red sauce all the time. I think it was like 88 cents for a box of pasta and then red sauce. So it was basically $1 dinners, every night.
Now, like, how do you take care of yourself nutritionally now?
Now I try to eat better. I try to eat mostly vegetarian, eat fruits and vegetables. I basically just try to take care of myself. But one of the things I like about AG1 as part of my morning routine is that I drink my AG1 and then I feel pretty good for a while afterward. And so if I have breakfast with the kids, that's great. If I am not able to eat breakfast for a long time because I'm taking kids to school or doing other various things or working or who knows what, then I'm also pretty good with that too. I just feel good in the morning.
So what is AG1's next gen?
So next gen is the upgraded formula that's been clinically proven to increase healthy gut bacteria by 10 times. But it's basically the same idea, a nutritional supplement that combines a multivitamin, probiotics, and a blend of superfoods into one scoop. So subscribe today to try the next gen of AG1. If you use my link, you'll also get a free gift with your first order. Check out drinkag1.com/climbinggold to get started with AG1's next gen and see the benefits for yourself. That's drinkag1.com/climbinggold.
If you could eat only one meal a day and just have it be a bar, would you do it?
Yeah, if I could eat one big bar and be done for the day and not have to eat anything else, I'd be amazing.
Do you not like other food?
No, I like food, but the hassle of buying food, cooking food, prepping, eating, and then cleaning up, I'm like, I would do away with all that and just spend my time chilling.
Yeah.
And just eat a bar. It'd be amazing. I would inject it if I could.
Does David Barr get you one step closer to that dystopian reality?
David Barr honestly does feel like it's a step in the right direction towards my beautiful dystopian world where I only eat a single thing. I think the David bars are a totally worthy contribution to the bar space, and that bars need this kind of disruption. I think it's nice to see a bar that has no added sugar, basically, and a lot of protein.
Like fill you up protein?
28 grams. I mean, I saw something on their box that their closest competitor is a piece of cod. And I was like, did you see that, the little graphic where they're showing like the ratio of like protein to price?
Does it taste better than a piece of cod?
Well, totally.
Though?
I was like, I mean, it's definitely way more portable, way easier to eat while adventuring, and just kind of generally easier than taking a piece of cod with you. And they're just really tasty, so they're kind of a treat. If you'd like to try David, you can go to davidprotein.com/climbinggold. Again, that's davidprotein.com/climbinggold. And remember, if you get 4 cartons on the website, you get the 5th one free. So, I mean, we got to hang out at the Olympics last summer and kind of witness the most recent iteration of climbing professionalism. I mean, just seeing like the glitz and the glamour of the Paris Olympics. I mean, it was just such a thing. What did that feel like to you to see modern competition climbing, basically? I mean, and you were there with your family, right? Like fully just spectating, like you were sitting in the seats watching with the fam, and you're like, this is a spectacle. So how did that feel?
It was super cool. USA Climbing, they did a training camp at my gym here in Spain before the Paris Olympics. And so it was really cool. We got to hang out with the whole team, and then they invited us to go up there with them. So it was a really cool opportunity that my family and we got to go to the Olympics and hang out with everybody and have like whatever VIP passes and all of that. And just kind of take it all in. And yeah, it was super exciting to be there, just to feel like the grandeur of being at the Olympics. In my time, like in my prime or whatever, that was definitely would be something that I would be psyched to be a part of, right?
Yeah. How different did it feel than, say, World Championships in 1997?
Well, interestingly, and I was talking with Gilbert Trabeau about that. So World Championships in 1997 was at the Paris Zenith Stadium or auditorium or whatever it is. And it was like maybe like 10,000 people in the stadium.
Oh, wow.
Like super packed, sold out. And so I don't know if I think it might have been particular to France, because France has always been a little bit like before its time, specifically within competition climbing, but it was big back then in France. And so as far as like sheer numbers and like, wasn't that different. I remember being in that stadium in 1997 and like the place was kind of like vibrating, right? You could feel like it was inside too. So there was like this element of like when something like that is inside, it feels like it's even more, the energy is more contained. But I mean, certainly just climbing being recognized as an Olympic sport is a huge deal. And it just feels like climbing is like on another level now. And so being there, seeing climbing a part of all that, it just felt like another level in some ways. And so it was very cool to be there, be a part of it. And just from a pure climbing standpoint, it was really interesting to see how things have evolved, because I think competition climbing, specifically roped climbing, got a little bit stagnant. And maybe that was one of the reasons why I also kind of maybe tapered off as well. It was very much just like pure endurance climbing. It wasn't very exciting. It was about basically like how long you could hold on. There was no time limit, so people could be up there for like 15 minutes, whatever. And then bouldering was kind of coming up, and it was more exciting. It was more explosive. And now looking at it, it's really interesting to see how things have evolved. And looking at sport climbing, difficulty climbing, super attractive to me as a climber. When I saw those routes.
Because it's more bouldery now?
Well, it's more, it's more dynamic. Yeah, it's more dynamic, and the movement looks really cool. So when I saw that, I was super inspired just as a climber. Bouldering, I feel like in the Olympics or in just whatever the competition format that we have now, I feel like the route setting has gone to a point where a bit of a turnoff in a way. Some of it, it's so far away from real rock climbing.
It's funny, the bouldering has gotten too bouldery and too dynamic, but the route climbing has gotten more bouldery. Yeah. Like basically, it's the route climbing has stayed within your sweet spot of like dynamic and interesting, and then the modern bouldering is just too dynamic and therefore no longer interesting. It's just funny. It's like you have a sweet spot of like I want it to be like jumpy and interesting, but not too crazy, because then that's too much.
Yeah. I mean, I think like definitely bouldering now, like. That style of climbing is so specific. The coordination kind of parkour boulders I mean, I know for myself anyways, it's really challenging to climb that style. You have to really specialize in that type of climbing. And I remember talking with Jacob Schubert, for example, and seeing some of the things that he was talking about by just being a little bit not as motivated for the bouldering competitions as before. And so it's interesting. I mean, it's just kind of like, maybe it's the natural progression or evolution, or it is what it is. But I think just kind of whatever, my commentary.
But so speaking of, being inspired by the route climbing at the Olympics, I mean, so then you made a quick return to competition climbing last fall. Like, tell us about your whole little journey.
Straight up, man. Like that, like being there at the Olympics, seeing people on that wall, like those routes looked amazing. Just all of those big volumes, all the amazing kind of like dynamic moves. And yeah, as a climber, as a professional climber, still feel like I can climb pretty hard. Yeah, I was like, man, my palms are sweating. Like I wanted to be up there, try those moves, and look really interesting and intriguing. And so I was like curious to do a couple of competitions, because being there, I was like, man, like I want to be up there, like as a climber. And like I've done within sport climbing pretty much a lot that there is to do. The one thing that I haven't participated in is the Olympics. And like, I was like, man, that would be amazing to get to be able to do that if it was possible. And started looking at what would I have to do that, to be able to be in the Olympics.
Yeah. So what do you have to do?
To be able to qualify for the nationals, the U.S. team, like you have to do this like national cup event. So from that, then you can do a climb at the national championships. And then from there, you go to the team trials. And then you go from there, you can qualify for the U.S. climbing team. And then you can do the international events. And then
you qualify for the Olympics.
Yeah. So it's a big process.
So which competitions did you do?
So I did one of the National Cup Series events. I went and I came in second at the event in New Jersey, which was cool. Like very little preparation, I'm basically just doing what I've always done. I just go rock climbing. I climb in the gym, when I'm not rock climbing, but I've no specific training. And it was cool just as an opportunity to take the temperature, see what it's all about, see what it feels like, see how it feels personally.
What did the other competitors think when Chris Sharma showed up at the random gym in New Jersey? Were they like, WTF?
Well, so, one of the really cool things is that it was just down the road from my good buddy Obi's house. And so I got to hang out with him. He's like an official coach too. So he like kind of like came in as my coach, and it was actually really special. Like I got to like, reintegrate into that whole world with one of my best friends from that era that like we competed at the junior nationals together in Pittsburgh, right? So to have him there with me was actually really meaningful. But it was funny because like I wasn't even sure I was going to compete. I had been sick the week before. I ended up going to the gym, my gym where I live here in Spain. And I had already kind of decided not to go. And then I actually felt amazing. I had this session. I was like, man, I feel really good. The comp literally the next day. And I was like, I looked at flights and I saw there was a flight leaving. It was like 4:30. And I saw there was a flight leaving at 6:45. Luckily, I live right by the airport, but I was like, shoot, like, fuck it, let's do this. And I went straight from the gym by my house. I grabbed my passport and I went to the airport like with chalk on my hands. And I flew in and I competed the next morning. It was like total spur of the moment. I was super tired and I drank I went to Starbucks and I got way too much coffee and I was like super jittery. And so like the first qualifying round wasn't very good. And I was like pretty nervous, but then the next round was actually really good. And then the next round was good too. Like I got into my headspace and it was super cool, man. It was an amazing experience to go into that space of competition climbing. And it was like a blast from the past, but it was also like competition can bring out the best or it can bring out the worst in people, right? And I think for me, being in that situation, it always put me on my game in a way that like I was able to perform better under that like pressure or, having being a little bit nervous. And so it was really cool to like be back in that like element and in a way like not really have too much expectation around it, but it was like to be on that space where you have to perform, like when you go up and you have like one shot and to make it count, it's very exhilarating.
Yeah, there's a photo of you looking super psyched on the podium in second place. Were you surprised to be there?
It was like after the semifinals, I wasn't that surprised. It wasn't like a super strong field, but the climbers around me, they're all good climbers. And the guy who won, he's super strong.
Who did win? I feel like he needs a shout out. None of us remember the name. It's like some kid from New Jersey.
I think his name is Vladimir or something. I'm sorry. I'm spacing on his name, but super cool kid. I mean, he's like 20 years old. And
Fitz just looked up the kid was Sergey Lochno.
Sergey, sorry. It was a Russian name. Sorry. Yeah. Vladimir. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we got to give him props because he did beat you at a comp. So, way to go, Sergey.
Badass for sure.
I remember seeing the results though and being like, who the hell's Sergey? I was like, who's that guy?
It was cool. I gave him one of my hats from our gym, the Sharma hats, and he was super stoked. And it was very cool to be a part of it and like kind of embrace it and participate. And I think it felt very just like therapy in a way, like people do like stand-up comedy or like public speaking to like, you put yourself out there, and it's really like healthy thing to do, because sometimes we just like get trapped in our comfort bubble and we don't want to put ourselves out, like expose ourselves in those kind of vulnerable situations. Right. And it was very like therapeutic in that way. It's very like healthy to do that sort of thing. And it felt very liberating, and to be able to do that and just go and have fun with it and embrace that. So I had a great time.
And so then you went to US Nationals, right? I mean, so you followed up on that?
I followed up and went to Nationals because I qualified for Nationals. So I was like, well, shoot, I might as well go there.
And when was that? Like, how much later was that?
That was in October of last year. So a couple months. Yeah, 2 months.
And so how did Nationals go?
It went okay. I got ninth. The field was pretty stacked. I mean, all these people that I had no idea who any of them are, but like a lot of really strong kids. Mm-hmm. I was really impressed by how many strong climbers there are out there. But it was still kind of like just this process of like taking the temperature, feeling what it was all about, coming back to this thing that's familiar, but it's also like I've been out of that world for so many years. So it was cool just to kind of like dip my toe back into that, see what it was all about, see what the feeling was like. And
I mean, what is the temperature like? I mean, if you got ninth in a field of like people you don't really know, were you like, whoa, it's a lot hotter in this pool now than it was when I was a kid? You're like, this is like a different scene.
Yeah, there was a very high level. I also felt like there was a lot of room for improvement on my inside. Like I basically came probably from climbing in Mallorca, deep water soloing, and literally no indoor climbing. Maybe I climbed a couple of days at the gym, but I just wanted to go see what it was all about. So like my feeling was like, oh, if I dedicate myself to this, I think I could get better at this style of climbing. Like I feel like the style like we're seeing in difficulty comps is a good style for me. And so like I'm intrigued by that because I feel like I could get better at that style.
And are you excited about it enough to be willing to put in the time and train and try? I mean, are you going to try to follow up with more comps like that?
Well, there was just the team trials. It was in Austin a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't go. So I don't know if that answers the question for you, but
the Olympics isn't for 4 years, or 3 more years.
Yeah, we'll see. Like it's hard, man. And after being at the Olympics, I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like I want to participate in that. It's a whole other thing to like completely dedicate yourself to that, and especially when that means not doing certain things that bring you a lot of happiness, like going rock climbing. And so that's one of the things that I struggle with, I think, because I just cannot force myself to not go rock climbing. I love rock climbing too much. And it's like when I have an amazing project in Mallorca, deep water soloing, it's like I love it so much. I'm trying this other climb right now, and this other crag called Santa Ana. It's this amazing piece of rock that, I love doing new first ascents. And so I still can't break myself away from that stuff to like fully commit to just climbing indoors, which seems like it's kind of important to do that. And so that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. When you're saying that you tried a couple comps to sort of take the temperature, I mean, really, I guess what you were testing was to see whether or not you can compete at a high level
without having to train that much, like while just climbing on rock and climbing outside without having to change the lifestyle too much. And I guess the takeaway is that you're like, you know what, to compete at the highest level now, you basically have to train indoors. And so,
well, I think it's interesting in general because, as a parent, I'm sure you know what I'm saying when, going on big, long climbing trips are not very compatible with our lifestyle now as like climbing dads, but competitions kind of are. Like you could be like, oh, I need to be here on this day. Like you can kind of like plan your life around that pretty easily and show up and do a competition and come back home. And in a way, like it kind of like, I have this amazing facility near my house that I built that I could train there. Like on paper, in a lot of ways, like it could fit into my life well.
Yeah.
I'm not like totally opposed to that, but I just get sucked into these projects on the rocks that, when I get inspired by these things, I just get so kind of like fall head over heels over these projects that I love that part of it so much that I kind of like get fully absorbed in that. And yeah, like for me this season, I've climbed very little in the gym, and that's great because I've been climbing on these amazing routes. But of course, when it comes to preparing for competition climbing, it's probably not that great. On the other hand, I could see like if I did a couple of other specific routes, like you always want more in climbing. Even if you do like the hardest routes, you're like, I want more of that. But if I could do a couple of the routes that I'm trying, like Le Blond or something, I could see maybe being like, you know what, I'm satisfied for now. I could see just committing to, training for competition. I could see doing that. Maybe we'll see. Like, it's hard to say, like in practice, it's really hard. Like if you live in a place where there isn't very much good rock climbing, I think it would be a lot easier. But I live in Catalonia, which is like one of the best places for sport climbing in the world. And so it's really hard for me, like when there's great weather, to not go rock climbing. So
it's just an interesting thing. At a certain point, you're like, oh, can I still, in competition is such an overt example of this. Like, can I still be the best, basically? I've been thinking about this because in the last couple of years, a couple of my speed records have been broken in Yosemite and various places where like, oh, people are doing things now. And like no one had really been competing in that discipline, whatever you want to call it, like big wall speed climbing and all that for like a long time. And no one had been doing anything. And so now a couple things have been broken and I'm sort of like, oh, should I get back into it? Like, should I do some of these things? Because some of them, some of the records are like 13 years old. I haven't even thought about them in like years. And now it's suddenly like back in the mix and you're like, oh, should I do that? And the thing is, I'd always like to think that I could, I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm a better climber than I was then. And, and also like gear is better and lighter and faster, basically I'm like, oh, I think I could do better than I did then. But then the reality is that I'm like, oh, is it worth spending that much time in Yosemite? Is it worth being away from the family for that long? Is it worth like doing the thing? In a way though, isn't that the essence of standards changing and like the sport growing and things moving on? At a certain point, if not now, certainly in 20 years, both of us will be completely left behind in various disciplines. And we'll just be kind of like, well, there's no chance that I could ever do what people are doing now. But like, at least for now, we're still kind of hanging in where it's like, oh, I think I could probably hang tough if I tried hard enough. Like, do I want to?
It's a very interesting conversation for ourselves, be at the point of life we're at, point of our careers, whatever, our climbing careers and accomplishments, because you don't want to be like old guy trying to like still like prove that you're the best. Like, I don't think that's like a good place to come from in general, and like trying to like, be someone that you're not and trying to like, like hold on to something that you're no longer are. We need to also evolve as people. Like, we're going into different phases. We're like, how old are you? Are you 40 yet? You're going to be 40?
No, I'm 39. I turned 40 this year.
So it's like,
definitely.
Yeah, it's like, we're like, let's not kid ourselves. We're in different places. We're not like, 20 years old trying to try to pretend like we would be kind of fooling ourselves, and we'd be kind of like deceiving ourselves in a way. But on the other hand, like looking at someone like Kelly Slater, I think is super inspiring. If you are still super passionate for what you do, you're still like psyched to push your limits. It feels like genuinely like you're inspired to do that stuff. Then it's kind of fun to still be able to play the game in a way that you're maybe in some ways even more free and more uninhibited than before, because you don't really have anything to prove. So if you can come from that that right place, I think it would be a beautiful thing. If you're doing it because you're trying to prove that you're still the top dog, then I'm not sure if that's the right place for me anyways. Like I want to embrace that there's new people in the sport, but at the same time, if I can use that to like also like continue to progress in my own path, I don't know. I think it can be really a cool thing. And yeah, like harnessing that power of competitiveness is an interesting idea to think about in general.
I totally hear what you're saying, and I agree. And I've always said much the same things about speed records and things like that, where you're like, oh, well, if you're overtly competitive in a negative way, that's bad. But if you're using that to sort of help you be the best that you can be, and and it's all sort of positive, then that's great. But it is just interesting with competition because, it is zero sum. Like, I mean, you are trying to beat other people.
Yeah.
Even if it is really healthy, it's still overtly competitive.
I think maybe my Olympic campaign is doomed to fail, just on the sense that like like in my career as a climber, like that's like one thing that like I never had that experience, and I'm like, man, that would be so cool to compete in the Olympics. I don't even have like a desire to like win it or anything like that. I just think it would be cool to be an Olympian or something. It's a vague ambition. It's a vague goal.
But it seems like going to the Olympics is actually something you maybe could do, especially if they separate out route climbing as its own discipline.
That's what got me kind of like curious about it. I was like, oh, if they take bouldering out, if it's just difficulty, then maybe that's not that far-fetched.
But so why not do that then? Or why not try?
Well, yeah, it's like comes down to like, do I want to like sacrifice rock climbing, right?
Though, I mean, the other question is, do you feel like you would sacrifice many of your days on rock, but your overall performance on rock might actually go up if you were training the way competitors train?
Yeah, man, I never ever like retired from competition climbing. I never was like, I'm done with this. And I still haven't, so I might go and compete in some more. I just, I'm also maybe just a little bit lazy, like I was like the challenge for me trying to qualify as an American, but I live in Europe, is like to go to the team trials, I have to fly across the world to do that. And so to go to this team trial event, like I looked at flights and I was like, oh, it's like 17-hour trip to get there. And I'm just like, oh.
No, totally. And especially when you're like taking your kids to school and like dealing and have a normal life, you're just kind of like, that's a lot.
I was like, oh, I should do that, or maybe I should just go climbing by around my house, And so that's kind of just
totally
internal dialogue. And yeah, looking back, I was like, maybe I should have gone for it, but I don't know. I think it's cool though to be there. Like it was a positive experience for me to participate in those events, and like I said, it was kind of like it's kind of therapeutic for the ego in a way to like put yourself in that kind of vulnerable place. But it was also very cool to like be back in that like isolation zone, like when you're sitting in the chair right before you go out to climb, and all of like the nerves that come up and trying to like manage that. It's so exhilarating. And so I was actually climbing later on, like a couple of weeks later, I was in Mallorca climbing, and I was cross paths with the competition climber from France, Mejdi Schalk. And I took him to this new spot where I've been climbing at. Deepwater Sullivan is a little bit different than sport climbing in the sense that like every try, you really want to make it a good try, because if you fall in, then you got to change out all your gear and you got to dry off and you got to traverse back over. And so the mindset before you make a try is actually very similar to right before you go out and compete. It's like, you're the nerves and you're like, want to like make that try count. And I was talking about that with him, and he was like, yeah, it's really similar to competition, actually. I think it's cool just to put yourself in those situations, like where you want to perform at your best, right? And I think it's also liberating to face some of those fears of like, well, what are people going to think? Like if I like get, 20th or something, like to be able to kind of like face that and then let go of that, it kind of liberates you to maybe even find new places for yourself within climbing that allows you to even climb harder, maybe.
We'll be back with more after the break. So a few years into my van life journey, when I was still very young and poor and living in my car, my grandma moved into the senior living community type of kind of nice old folks home. And whenever I was in town, I would go and do Sunday brunch with her. And it was this just insane feast with the waffle bar, the omelet bar, the fruit bar, like all the different stations. And as a 23-year-old man living in a car, I would just go in there with like a bucket basically and just load up and just eat everything. I was so psyched.
Did they have Kodiak cakes?
They probably did. It was a pretty nice spread.
Now you obviously don't have a breakfast bar, but do you guys eat Kodiak cakes?
Well, now I have a wife who makes them for our children, so it might not be quite as opulent of a spread, but it's still pretty delicious. The beauty of Kodiak cakes is that they're way higher protein, so they're just more filling than a traditional pancake. And they just seem a little heartier, feel a little more wholesome. I mean, if something's called Kodiak, you can assume it's kind of hearty.
And what other products are you guys eating?
There's the oatmeal. That's a go-to breakfast for the kids also. There are these insane little dessert cups that my wife loves. Microwavable brownies. It's just, they're the definition of opulent treat. We try not to keep too many around or else we eat them all. Fuel your summer adventures with a quick breakfast packed with the real good stuff. 100% whole grains, protein, and a whole lot of flavor. Find Kodiak products at your local grocery store. They're the ones with the bear on them. Learn more at kodiakcakes.com.
I feel like the desert just works me. It drains the water out of me like crazy. How do you stay hydrated?
I think the desert destroys you because you're from the Pacific Northwest, so you're like a plump grape just waiting to get shriveled. But I'm already like a tight little raisin living in the desert, so I think I'm a little bit more heat adapted. You do physiologically heat adapt a little bit, but then also you just have to be super on top of drinking enough fluids and making sure you get electrolytes. And so when I do big missions in the desert, I do often use LMNT.
Do you see like friends that come visit a lot? Do you see them get just worked?
I was recently hanging out at home and 3 friends who had been adventuring in Red Rock that had actually been traipsing around in full afternoon sun looking for one of their lost phones on a trail. So they spent hours just walking back and forth in the desert in the sun. They showed up at the house and I gave them each 2 cans of the LMNT sparkling water, and it seriously looked life-giving. They were so worked and so parched, and they just chugged it. They were like, this is so good. It was like the best thing they'd ever had. I think the LMNT sparkling water is especially good when you're very thirsty.
What makes LMNT different from other electrolyte mixes?
LMNT has way more salt than most mixes. There's also no sugar, but it also has the things you'd expect like potassium and magnesium. So it makes your water delicious, and it has everything you need and nothing that you don't. Get a free 8-count sample pack of LMNT's most popular drink mix flavors with any purchase at drinklmnt.com/climbinggold. That's drinklmnt.com/climbinggold. Find your favorite LMNT flavor or share it with a friend.
Hey everyone, Fitz here. Did you know that you can get Climbing Gold ad-free and support the show? That's right. We now have the unroped option. All the same thought, laughter, and inspiration without the ads. We know some of you have been asking for it, and now that we are going year-round, it made sense to offer it. So there's a link in the show notes. Sign up, and then you get Climbing Gold ad-free wherever you get your podcasts. It's super easy. Check it out.
I'm kind of curious. This is a bit of a detour, but hearing you talk about the high-intensity situations and like red pointing, trying to send your project. So I've kind of noticed that in the last year or so, I've been sort of shying away from trying to red point projects or like trying to do things at my limit. I think largely because as a dad now, my performance is so erratic, or with 2 little babies anyway. You just like never really know. Like I feel good, I feel strong, but I probably only have 1 day a week where I actually like feel like I'm really performing at my potential. Mm-hmm. And I just have no idea what day that's going to be, because like some days the babies wake up, some days we don't sleep. Sometimes things just like for whatever reason, I can't really put my finger on it. But I feel like I'm sort of shying away from like limit red pointing because I'm just like, it feels too erratic. It's like if the weather was always bad and you can't really control it, you'd be like, wow, do I want to put that out there? And so I find that I've been gravitating towards projects where it's like, it doesn't have to be peak performance on the right day because I just don't know when the peak performance is going to come. When your kids were small, were you still trying to like red point at your limit and stuff?
I was, but I think I've definitely had like limit projecting is a very like esoteric thing. When you start to really like dissect it, you're like, you could easily start questioning what you're doing with your time.
Yeah. And your whole life. You're like, why am I doing this?
Like what am I doing? Just going back over and over to the same piece of rock, like hang dogging up this thing, trying to find these like micro progressions along the way. And sometimes it's a valid question to ask yourself, and it's fine to like do other types of climbing too. I think it's good to mix it up. I think it is intriguing. Somehow it keeps pulling me back to that whole process of projecting something, of trying something that's at your limit. I think there's something very intriguing about that. But also when it doesn't go the way you'd like it to go, sometimes you're like, can also question it, because as you were saying, when you have limited free time, you want to spend your time doing things that feel like productive and good and
that are fun. Yeah.
And it can be good when you make progressions, but sometimes on those projects, like you actually go backwards, and then you start to really doubt yourself of like, what am I spending my time doing? And I don't know. It's like I said, it's a whole other can of worms to explore that. But I think, interestingly enough, it's like kind of like one of the fundamental questions of like why we climb in the first place, right? When you could just hike up the backside to get to the top, right? So we somehow, I mean, it's a really bizarre thing we do as climbers. You know, we look for the hardest way, and then we look for the easiest way up the hardest way, right? It's kind of weird. Like we're like, you know, it's a little bit freaky. So it's kind of esoteric in that way of trying to really make sense of it. But I mean, when you do it, it feels pretty awesome. So maybe it's best not to like dissect it too much.
So you've been a professional climber for almost 30 years now. Is that fair? It's like,
I think for like 30 years.
That's crazy. So you've been a professional climber for about 30 years. You've been sort of, I mean, for at least 20 of those years, you've been actively pushing the sport, like establishing the hardest grades, establishing, you know, whatever. I mean, that's like, you've had at least 2 decades plus, like pushing climbing in your own directions. How do you explain that kind of longevity, like 20 years of pushing something ahead? I mean, that's a long time.
I think like probably like for sure that's genetics is like important part of it, like why I became good in the first place. I don't know, at this point, like I can say like what makes me inspired now is like, especially in this like world of like new experiences. So, you know, like dealing like whatever, like last 10 years, I started a business, started a family, all of these things that really like pulled me out of my comfort zone. And amazing like personal growth that came from those experiences, but made me really appreciate my comfort zone, which is going climbing. You know, it's like a very grounding thing. And yeah, within climbing, that's kind of just what you do, right? You keep, you know, it's this progression. You always want to keep progressing in some way. I mean, it's an interesting question. Like, how do you continue? I think one of the interesting questions that like I'm also like trying to wrap my head around is like, how do you progress once you physically can no longer progress as far as climbing harder? But I feel like there's still like some like leeway in there to maybe get a little bit better. And
well, that's the interesting thing with progression though, is like, yeah, I mean, I'm the same way where it's like, I love getting better at climbing, feeling like I'm doing things I haven't done before. But I've had a few experiences in the last couple of years where I'm like, man, do I really have to do this to, you know, like I did the Hurt, like the Red Rock Traverse, like basically all the peaks in Red Rock is like this giant enchainment. And when I was working on it, I was just like, is this what it takes to do new things now? I was like, this is really hard, you know, like it was 36 hours of continuous climbing. It was like kind of heinous. And, you know, it was fun. It was inspiring. It was beautiful in its way. But I was kind of like, this is a lot of effort to do something new, you know, and at a certain point you're kind of like, and now in another year or two, if I want to do something else that's new, it's going to have to be bigger than that. And I'm kind of like, man, that's too much. You know, like, do I want to go bigger than that? And so, I mean, you know, you're in the same position in terms of sheer difficulty where you're like, oh, if I want to do something new, it's got to be like insanely hard. And you're just kind of like, God, it's hard to do harder things all the time. It's like, it's just like,
I think it's, you know, I don't want to bore your audience with like, you know, 2 dudes like existential midlife crisis, but about climbing. But I think for me personally, it's a very interesting conversation, because how do you keep doing something in an authentic way that feels like genuine? You're not doing it because you don't know what else to do with yourself, but it's like this, you know, authentic expression of yourself. And doing new routes is so good for me. Like putting up new first ascents, because you're creating something. So I guess like traveling, going to new places, new styles of climbing, they're all forms of progression, right? But I think like rediscovering, revisiting all that stuff in the context of it being like purely for yourself, in the sense of like trying to leave a mark in climbing. I think it's a new chapter in that sense of like, I don't want to go to all these comps or try to do 9C to like try to prove to anybody that I'm like still the man or something. I feel like that would be kind of a sad place to be coming from personally. But if I can just kind of like rediscover this thing for myself, because it's like keeps bringing me joy. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's like this yoga practice, or it's like this like martial arts discipline. It's this thing that we do that like owns our body and our mind. And it's how we like tap into that best version of ourselves. Then there's a lot of value in doing that, continuing to do that. And especially if we can find ways that like we feel like we're reinventing ourselves in some way. I feel like there's a huge amount of like personal satisfaction that we can still get from that. And like I said, like maybe that even creates a space where we're able to do something even beyond what we've been able to do before, just because there's a certain amount of like freedom of like not giving a fuck about anything else, but you're just like fully immersed in your own. I don't know. I think it's interesting as like an artist or something, or as a musician continues to produce new like bodies of work throughout their lives. It's a bit different as an athlete, but I think climbing is interesting that way because it kind of is more than just a sport in that way. And so you can continue to like reinterpret it, you know, as you go through life in different ways. And there is this, potential that we can maybe do some of our best work later in life, maybe because we have like we give less of a fuck about, you know, what other people think about it, you know, we're just kind of like going and, you know, like the other day when we went climbing Clark Mountain, not that it was like a amazing epic day as far as performance, but, you know, just having like what happens after you've like climbed the hardest routes in the world and you free solo El Cap, like it's kind of like an empty feeling. You're like, well, where do you take this? And so there's in some ways this huge amount of freedom at that point of like, we can do whatever we want and take it wherever we want to take it. And there's, it can be a bit kind of uncertain how to like make sense of it. But I feel like there's this freedom, this free space that we can play and do whatever the hell we feel like. And there's something pretty cool about that.
Yeah, I've said that exact thing actually with free soloing El Cap. I was like, well, it does offer a lot of freedom because you realize that anything you do the rest of your life is not going to mean as much as what you've done before. So you're just kind of like, it just means that from now on, anything you do is for you because it just doesn't matter. And then, you know, might find you do your hardest fucking rock climb of your life because, you know, I don't know. It's interesting as climbing beyond as a professional climber or anything, but it's like one of our life companions, you know, it's like I've been climbing for most of my life now. And so it's like this thing that accompanies us through all these different chapters of our lives. I mean, it's pretty rad to see that you can continue to climb at a high level, like into your 60s, basically, which is incredible. It's really very amazing to see because when I started climbing, like no one had even like made it to 30 even as a hard sport climber, right? And so it's really neat to see the kind of like how like the longevity that you could have as a rock climber and kind of like reinterpret that in so many different ways. And I think one of the other things too, that we talked about it when I was out in Vegas last time, but climbing is so much defined by these big trips and expeditions and stuff. But when you become a dad and you're like, it all becomes like localized, you know, like, so you're having these basically designing your climbing around where you live. And so like things become different, you know, at that point in your life. But I feel like it's just more intimate, all of those experiences. And it's not always easy. Like, how do you mix that with the element of it being a career and all that stuff? But I think it's pretty fascinating to continue to still find like the motivation to go rock climbing and continues to like, you know, keep giving me like motivation. So.
Thanks, Chris, for sitting down to chat with us. Since we talked, the International Olympic Committee has indeed announced that lead climbing will be its own discipline. So maybe, just maybe,
We'll see Chris in LA in 2028. Hey, have you heard that you can get Climbing Gold ad-free? Some of you asked for this as an option, and this year we've made it possible. We're calling it Climbing Gold Unroped. You get your podcast delivered to all major podcasting platforms. It's super simple. Sign up. Link is in the credits if you're interested. We are grateful to our sponsors, but we also understand. So check it out. Link is in the show notes. Climbing Gold is created by Duct Tape Them Beer. Alex Honnold is our host. Our production team includes the talents of Skylar Perwins, Marco Seiler Gonzalez, and Evan Phillips. Our creative director is me, Fitzcahall. Music today by Padel, Miss Madley, R. May Stars, and Brendan O'Connell. Will Taylor handles our ad sales. Our executive producers are Jonathan Retzik and Ben Endy for RXR Sports, and Lacey Hendricks and Becca Cahal for Duct Tape Them Beer. Thanks for listening.